For 2 long years, the conflict in Gaza was a grinding, brutal reality, a cycle of violence so entrenched it seemed to defy any solution. Then, with a suddenness that stunned the world, the guns fell silent. The announcement came not from the usual diplomatic channels, but with the distinct, unmistakable flourish of a political showman. On October 8th, President Donald Trump declared that Israel and Hamas had agreed to the first phase of a peace plan. A ceasefire was in effect. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the pause in fighting is merely the opening act of a far more complex and potentially far more dangerous geopolitical drama. This is not a peace treaty. It is a fragile, conditional truce, brokered under extraordinary circumstances. The question is not just if it will hold, but why it happened now, and what price the region and the world will ultimately pay for this sudden, uneasy silence. To understand the fragility of this peace, we must first dissect the deal itself. The agreement, often referred to as the first phase, is fundamentally a prisoner exchange wrapped in a temporary cessation of hostilities. The core terms are straightforward, yet loaded with potential pitfalls. Israel agreed to a 72-hour ceasefire, during which its forces would redeploy from certain areas of the Gaza Strip. In return, Hamas committed to releasing a specific number of hostages, initially focusing on the civilian and non-military captives. Reports suggest the immediate release of around 20 individuals, with a countdown beginning the moment the ceasefire took effect. Crucially, the agreement also mandates the unimpeded entry of humanitarian aid, food, fuel, and medical supplies into Gaza, a lifeline desperately needed by the civilian population. However, the devil, as always, is in the details, or rather, the omissions. The agreement is conspicuously vague on the long-term status of Gaza, the fate of the remaining military hostages, and the ultimate political future of Hamas. It is a temporary bandage on a gaping wound. The term comprehensive end of Gaza war, which some sources have highlighted, is a political aspiration, not a guaranteed outcome. It's a classic case of kicking the hardest questions down the road, hoping that the momentum of peace will somehow solve the unsolvable. The whole process has the distinct feel of a high-stakes reality show, where the host, in this case, the U.S. president, gets to declare victory at the end of the first season, leaving the audience to wonder if the sequel will be a tragedy. The most striking element of this ceasefire is the central role played by Donald Trump. While the U.S. State Department and career diplomats have been working the issue for years, it was Trump, operating outside the traditional diplomatic framework, who claims to have sealed the deal. His approach was characteristically unconventional. Instead of relying on the established peace process, Trump utilized a combination of personal relationships, economic leverage, and perhaps most importantly, a willingness to engage directly with parties others deemed untouchable. His special envoy, Steve Witkoff, has been credited with the tireless behind-the-scenes negotiations. That brought the two sides to the table. But the Trump factor is a double-edged sword. On one hand, his willingness to break the mold provided the necessary shock to the system to achieve a breakthrough. On the other, his involvement injects a massive dose of domestic American politics into an already volatile international crisis. For Trump, this is a clear political victory, a powerful foreign policy achievement to tout in his potential return to the White House. The timing is critical. For Israel, the deal offers a much-needed respite from international pressure and the immediate return of some hostages, easing the domestic political crisis facing Prime Minister Netanyahu. For Hamas, the ceasefire provides a chance to regroup, secure the entry of vital supplies, and crucially gain a degree of international legitimacy by being a direct party to a U.S.-brokered agreement. This is where the criticism sharpens. By bypassing the established mechanisms and focusing on a quick, high-profile win, the long-term stability of the region may have been sacrificed for short-term political gain. The deal, while saving lives today, risks empowering a non-state actor like Hamas and further marginalizing the Palestinian Authority, complicating any future, more comprehensive peace efforts. The question is whether this is a genuine step toward peace or simply a strategic pause in a larger conflict orchestrated for the benefit of a few powerful individuals. The Gaza ceasefire is not an isolated event. It is a tremor that sends ripples across the entire geopolitical landscape. The primary players, the US, Israel, and Hamas, have their immediate gains, but the wider regional powers are watching closely, calculating their next moves. Iran and the axis of resistance. For Tehran, the ceasefire is a mixed blessing. While it halts the immediate destruction of their proxy, Hamas, it also demonstrates a degree of independence by Hamas in negotiating directly with a U.S. intermediary. Iran's influence, exerted through Hezbollah in Lebanon and other groups, remains a critical variable. Any long-term peace plan will inevitably be tested by Iranese commitment to its axis of resistance. The Gulf states Saudi Arabia and the moderate Arab states, particularly those who have normalized or are considering normalization with Israel, view this development with cautious optimism. A stable Gaza is essential for the success of the Abraham Accords and the broader economic integration of the region. However, the optics of a deal that appears to reward Hamas could complicate their domestic political situations. Their long-term goal remains a stable, U.S.-backed regional security architecture that counters Iranian influence. China and Russia, both Beijing and Moscow, are keen observers. They have consistently criticized the U.S. approach to the conflict, often framing it as a failure of Western diplomacy. A successful U.S.-brokered peace deal, even a temporary one, slightly diminishes their narrative of American decline. It is vital to maintain a standard of fairness in our analysis. Just as we scrutinize the political motivations of the U.S. and Israel, we must also acknowledge the strategic calculus of Hamas. Their acceptance of the deal is not a sudden conversion to pacifism, but a tactical maneuver to survive, resupply, and maintain their political control over Gaza. The ceasefire is a strategic pause for all parties, not a moral pivot. The true test of this ceasefire lies not in the signing, but in the implementation. The road ahead is littered with hurdles, any one of which could derail the entire process. The hostage dilemma. The first phase only addresses a portion of the hostages. The fate of the remaining captives, particularly the soldiers, is the key to the second phase of the deal. Hamas will undoubtedly demand significant concessions, likely the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners, including high-profile figures, a demand that will be politically toxic for any Israeli government. The humanitarian crisis. While aid is now flowing, the scale of the destruction in Gaza is immense. Rebuilding will require billions of dollars and a massive, coordinated international effort. Who will oversee this reconstruction? Will it be the marginalized Palestinian Authority, or will Hamas retain control of the distribution, further cementing its power? The deal is silent on the mechanism for long-term governance. The International Stabilization Force, one element of the broader Trump peace plan, mentioned in earlier reports, is the creation of a temporary international stabilization force. This is a concept fraught with complexity. Which nations would contribute troops? What would be their mandate? And perhaps most importantly, would Hamas or Israel accept the presence of foreign forces on the ground? The history of international interventions in the Middle East is a cautionary tale of good intentions meeting impossible realities. This ceasefire is a moment of hope, but it is a hope built on a foundation of political expediency and tactical maneuvering. It is a testament to the power of unconventional diplomacy, but also a stark reminder of the deep, unresolved issues that continue to plague the region. We must watch closely, not just for the sound of the next shot, but for the subtle shifts in the geopolitical chessboard that will determine whether this fragile peace is a genuine turning point or merely the calm before the next inevitable storm.